Well, hello, my name is Ed Hawks, and this is the 18th edition of Listen Up Illinois. And today I have a first. I haven't had a storyteller before, so today I have a storyteller who also happens to play guitar and sing. And her name is Linda Dust, and I'm happy to welcome her to the show. I believe you're gonna start out with a story today, Linda.
And this story really is true. I had somebody come up to me one time after I'd told it and said, I almost believe that really was your grandfather. It really is.
It is your grandfather.
It really is. We called him Daddy Pete. We weren't sure why we called him that. He wasn't our daddy, and his name wasn't even Pete. His name was Earl Edgar Ward, and he was my mother's grandfather. Gosh, I can't believe I keep stuttering. Anyway, he was my mother's father. We didn't know him well. We lived in Illinois, where my parents had moved after the birth of their first child, my oldest sister, and he lived in Oklahoma, where my parents had met and married. Now, back in the 50s and 60s, families didn't take big vacations, so we didn't see each other very much. But one time, my mother, who had been in ill health, was feeling well enough to take us to Oklahoma on the train, and we got to spend time with Daddy Pete. My sister and I wondered about him wearing a cowboy hat all the time, and we figured out it's the law because it's Oklahoma. But as happens with families, Daddy Pete passed away, my grandmother passed away, my mother passed away, and we lost track of that whole side of the family till the email showed up about 4 years ago. My brother forwarded it to me with a note, "Who is this?" And it said, "Hi, I think we're related. My sister was Betty Jean Ward. My dad was Pete Ward. I think you knew him as Daddy Pete." Well, I knew right away when I saw the signature that it was my Aunt Pam, the second child from Daddy Pete's second marriage. And I wrote back immediately and asked her to send me stories of Daddy Pete since we didn't know him, and why did he wear that cowboy hat? I asked her if it was because of his hairline, because my brothers, I'd noticed, had gone rapidly bald, unlike my father's side of the family. She sent an email back right away. She said, "Oh, yes, I recognize Daddy Pete's hairline in your brother's pictures, but he didn't wear that cowboy hat because of the baldness. It was because he really was a cowboy. He had roped calves in the rodeo until he was in his 50s, and he worked cattle on ranches most of his life. And that was the reason that he and my grandmother were divorced. She kind of thought he should get a real job in Oklahoma in the 30s. But they were friends for the rest of their lives." Well, I thought that was all very interesting, but I didn't really feel too connected to it. And so I asked her for some pictures. And a few days later, in my email inbox, there was a picture, but it was too big for my screen. So I had to scroll down, and from the top of the picture, I saw the tips of a horse's ears. And I scrolled down a little farther and saw his forelock and saw the top of a cowboy hat. And down farther, the horse's eyes and face and the brim of the hat and the eyes of a man and the nose and my mother's mouth. My mother had been gone for well over 30 years at that point. I didn't even know I remembered what her mouth looked like. But there it was. And I manipulated the picture until I could see it all at once. And there, in black and white, was a horse, and standing next to that horse was a cowboy in dirty, muddy chaps and a mud-stained coat and a sweat-stained cowboy hat, smiling back at me with my mother's mouth. And I had my connection. That was my Daddy Pete. He was a cowboy. I'm his granddaughter. Now, this song, the first time I heard the song after learning the story of Daddy Pete and finding out that Grandma Hazel, although she still loved him, just didn't get the whole cowboy thing, I knew I'd never hear it again or sing it again without thinking of Daddy Pete. The song is Night Rider's Lament by Michael Burton. As I was out a-riding, the graveyard shift to midnight till dawn, the moon was as bright as a reading light for a letter from an old friend back home. He said, "Last night I run on to Jenny, northern lights. They've never seen a hawk on the wing. They've never seen a spring at the Great Divide. And they've never heard old Camp Cookie sing. Odelay, odelo, odelay, tee-o, deedalay, tee-o, odelay. Odelay, odelo, lay, tee, deedalay, tee-o, odelay. Well, I read up the last of my letter, and I tore off the stamp for Black Jim. Little Billy rode up to relieve me. He just looked at my letter and grinned. He said, "Why do they ride for their money? And why do they rope for short pay? They ain't getting nowhere and they're losing their share. Oh, they all must be crazy out there. But they've never seen the northern lights. They've never seen a hawk on the wing. They've never seen a spring at the Great Divide. No, they never heard old Camp Cookie sing. Odelay, odelo, odelay, tee-o, deedalay, tee-o, odelay. Odelay, odelo, lay, tee, deedalay, tee-o, odelay.
Nice. I think that's the first person I've had yodel on the show. You can yodel, so that's
Yeah.
how does a person go about learning how to yodel?
A lot of time alone in the car. I mean, a lot of time. In my day job, I'm a sales rep for my brother's company, and before that, I drove to Decatur every day to work, and so I had a lot of alone time in the car and put on different CDs, a lot of Riders in the Sky and various other groups that yodel, and just keep doing it until you can stand yourself.
But you have to do it alone. You can't do
Oh,
it
yeah.
with your family.
Oh,
around.
no, no,
It's
no. They'll put you out the house really quick.
kind of like fiddle playing.
A lot
Learn
like
how to
fiddle
play the
playing.
fiddle.
It sounds like you're killing cats until you finally figure out
Do
what
you
you're
get
doing.
those notes as they go up. Can you explain how it works? What is the kind of
The mechanism in your throat is called the epiglottis, and the term is called stroking the epiglottis, which doesn't sound like a very nice thing to say, but it's in a woman's voice. It's called the flip, and it's where you go from one voice register up to the next. And normally you try to do that smoothly, but when you're yodeling, you're trying to hit that point and go up. And the trick is when you hit that point, getting the right note when you get up above it.
Kind of a slide up, or just actually just trying to.
You jump up. I mean, you hit. It's hard to you're. You start out. You're going hey oh 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 oh, and you're trying to. You got to. It's those both notes, but you got to hit that little pop in the middle to jump up to it.
So it's kind of a vocal exercise, like singers kind of go. Do
Yeah,
these
a lot like
exercises.
that. And I found out that the surgery they do for sleep apnea, they take out the epiglottis.
Oh, so you can't yodel after.
So I better not get sleep apnea. I just
Won't
mess
be
up
good
my
anymore.
yodeling altogether.
So how did you get into storytelling?
Well, it started out with a dulcimer class that Mike Anderson taught. And I had known Mike for many years. We kind of lost track. And I took this course, or this class, and I asked him if he was still doing the Clayville Festival. It was a little out of date. He said, oh, no, I'm running this storytelling festival. I really think you ought to come. I think you'd really like it. And so that summer I decided to buy a tent and camp, because my son was 12, I think, and we thought, he's not going to want to hang out with Mom a lot more. So let's just have one big
Right.
hoorah. And so we went. and we really liked it. And so I started going back to it was at Lincoln's New Salem every year. And I started out as a fan, and then I also noticed they were also playing folk music too. My favorite love, the first song or music I ever remember trying to play was Peter, Paul, and Mary, because I had a sister that was 8 years older, and she brought back all these records from college that, this was wonderful. But it's not a big avenue for that kind of folk music. But I noticed they were playing that. I thought, well, that's interesting. And I think I'd been going to the festival about 4 years when I thought, maybe I could try to do that. And I wrote to Dan Ketting. I'd gotten to know him and didn't get an answer. And I thought, I wonder if I didn't offend anybody, did I? Went online to see what Mike had in store for the festival that a few months later, and he had an open stage for the first time in the history of the festival. I thought, that's kind of a put your money where your mouth is moment. So I went, and I had prepared a little story behind the song piece, and I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. Ran into Dan. He said, my computer crashed. I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you. He said, but will you go out to dinner with us afterwards? I really want to talk to you about storytelling, and did you sign up for the open stage? I said, well, I haven't. He said, you really need to. You really need to. So I did, and I did this piece that I had prepared. And we went to dinner afterwards, and Dan said, I think you ought to join the guild. I said, what guild is that? He said, the Storytelling Guild in Urbana, Champaign-Urbana Storytellers. I said, how do I do that? He said, this is Kim Sheehan, she's our president. And that gave me the place to learn how to tell a story. About 2 years later, I started telling professionally, but that is a wonderful place to kind of get your feet under you.
So there's a storytelling guild in Urbana that meets on a regular basis?
They meet the third Tuesday of every month, and the meeting changes. You can go online, just Google Champaign-Urbana Storytelling Guild, and on our website it'll pop up. I don't know the exact address, but yeah, and it's a wonderful place to learn how to tell a story, to learn how to present the story, and what stories you can and can't tell.
Right.
And it's just really very helpful.
Good. Well, do you have a story for us now? You want to do a story? Or?
This is from England. It's called The Edge of the World. There was a young man who lived in this beautiful house built of redwood, overlooking a lake in the forest, just an idyllic life. Anything he wanted, he already had, but he got to worrying that he was missing something. And he decided one day that it was his luck that he was missing. So he went to the wise woman in the village, and he said, tell me where I can find luck. I don't have any. She looked at him and she said, well, God is the only one that can tell you that. And he said, oh, well, where can I find God? She said, keep walking east till you get to the edge of the world. God will be there. The young man thanked her, and off he went. And he walked a day and a week and a month and a year and a year and a day. And he came to this clearing where the road kind of went on either side of it. And on one side there was a pack of wolves. They had beautiful, long, lush fur, just gorgeous, and bright, shining eyes that looked pretty hungry. To the other side was one little wolf with kind of mangy hair falling out, and his eyes were dull, and he was skinny. He decided he would go that way around the clearing, and the wolf stopped him. He said, excuse me, where are you going? He said, well, I'm going to the edge of the world to ask God why I don't have any luck. Oh, said the wolf, well, could you ask a question for me? Could you ask God why I'm so small and frail, and my brothers and sisters over there are so big and beautiful? I sure will, said the young man, and he continued his journey, and he walked a day and a week and a month and a year and a day, and he came to a stand of trees, beautiful, long-limbed, with leaves that looked like they were scraping the clouds from the sky when the wind blew. Just gorgeous, except for one. It had 3 limbs on it, fewer leaves, and it just looked pretty out of place. And as he was walking past the tree spoke to him and said, where are you going? He said, I'm going on a journey to the edge of the world to see God and ask him why I'm not having any luck. And the tree said, well, would you ask God a question for me? Well, sure, said the young man. And the tree said, ask him why I'm so small and all the other trees are so big and beautiful. Sure will. And off he went, and he walked a day and a week and a month and a year and a year and a day, and he came to this cottage surrounded by a white picket fence. The flowers in the garden were every color of the rainbow, beautiful. He knocked on the door. This gorgeous woman answers, and her face lights up in a grin. Oh, I'm so happy to see you. Please, please come in, she said. And he came in, and she fixed him a meal like he'd never eaten before, and they talked long into the night. And he was really having a good time. And finally she asked him, well, what brings you here? Oh, he said, I'm on a journey. I'm going to the edge of the world to see God and ask him why I have no luck. Oh, said the woman. She said, well, would you ask him for me why I'm so lonely? I sure will, said the young man, and off he went. And he walked a day and a week and a month and a year and a year and a day. And there he was at the edge of the world. And on a silver white cloud off in the distance, he saw God. And he said, God, oh, God, I need to ask you a question. The cloud came closer. God said, ask. He said, why don't I have any luck? God looked back at him. Looked at him for a long time, and he said, because you're stupid. What? I have given you luck in abundance. It's everywhere around you, but you don't see it. Well, how do I find it? Said the young man. He said, open your eyes. Okay, I can do that. And so he reversed. Before he turned around, he said, I have some more questions. And God said, I'm God. I already know. And he whispered the answers. And then the man reversed his journey, and he walked a day and a week and a month and a year and a day, and came to the cottage. And the woman was again delighted to see him. And she fixed him an even better meal. And he told her that that was the best food I've ever eaten. And she asked him, did you see God? Yes, I did. And God told me to tell you, if you were married, you wouldn't be lonely. Well, that's a wonderful idea, said the woman. Would you marry me? Would you be my husband? And the young man looked at her and said, oh, no. I'm far too busy looking for my luck. But then first nice man I see, I'll send him your way. Thank you, said the woman. And off he went, walking a day and a week and a month and a year and a day. And he came to that tree, and the tree just was shivering with only one leaf left, and said, did you ask God? Yes, I did, said the tree. Or said the young man. He said, I asked him why you were the way you were, and he said, somebody put a treasure chest under your roots. And you know, a tree is as big down underneath the ground as it is above, and if somebody takes that treasure chest out, you'll be just as big as any of the trees. Well, there were some workmen here not too long ago. They left their shovel. Could you dig out that chest? Oh, no, said the young man. I'm far too busy looking for my luck. But the first strong man I see, I'll send him back. Thank you, said the tree. And off the young man went. And he walked a day and a week and a month and a year and a day. And he came to that wolf. And the wolf looked at him and said, oh, did you see God? Yes, I did, said the young man. Did you ask him? Yes, I did. And God told me the reason you're so small and so frail is you don't have the proper nutrition. If you would eat what you're supposed to eat, you'd be as big and beautiful as any of your brothers and sisters. In fact, God told me to tell you, let me see, he said, that you were supposed to eat the first stupid animal that came your way. And that's just what the wolf did. It's the edge of the world from England.
So, storytellers take stories from all over the world, or someone's from England? Or?
I tend toward, I like English and Irish and Scottish tales, and Eastern European, because they're very colorful and imaginative. You get them in a lot of books. Most, I really do mostly folk tales. You can't tell someone else's property without their permission, and I do tell some stories that other people have written, but only with their permission.
Okay, so there are still stories that are being written that people come up with on their own that are new.
And I write some of my own stories. And usually, I'm not good at fiction. I just write what happens, and I've warned my family.
So yours comes from your life.
from my life, from my ancestors. Somebody in my family does something stupid, that's fodder. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I was privileged last summer, to tell a story on the stage at the Bitter End in Greenwich Village. They had a story slam, there's a group called The Moth in New York City that is a storytelling group, and they have an event twice a month. And I was out there visiting, and the girl that I was staying with had found that they were doing this at the Bitter End, which, me being such a folk junkie, that stage has held some of my absolute idols in folk music, and to be able to tell a story on that stage was pretty amazing. But it had to be an original story, had to be 5 minutes long, when no longer, and it had to involve their theme for that week, and their theme was triangles. So I'll tell you the story.
Okay.
I'm involved in a love triangle. It's sad. It involves me and my husband and his boat. Now, you got to know that my husband's a bass fisherman, and bass fishermen are just a little bit different than other sportsmen in that they don't keep the fish they catch. They don't eat them, although people offer us recipes all the time, and my husband just shudders. They catch the fish, weigh them, then turn them loose, hoping that they will get bigger so that they can catch them again and weigh them and turn them loose and get bigger. You get the idea. Now, the one thing that all fishermen have that in tournament fishing is their boat. And each fisherman has his own ideal boat, that he really wants this brand. And for my husband, it was a Ranger. He wanted that boat so badly, and we'd saved money, and he'd gotten everything, all his ducks in a row, and he was ready to order the boat of his dreams when I said, we're going to have a child. So, well, I didn't get the boat that year, and I did resent it when his bass club started calling Michael Ranger. But we plugged on, and finally it came time where he could order his boat. He pored over the catalog with all the options, and he brought that catalog to me, and he said, "What do you think, this one or this one?" "Don't care. It's your boat. Make yourself happy." And he didn't learn real fast. He'd come back a few days later. "Well, what do you think of the color?" "Don't care. It's your boat. Make yourself happy." Finally, he stopped asking, and it came he was just about ready to send in the order, but he had one more decision to make, and he couldn't decide, and he asked me again. He said, "I'm not sure which motor." He said, "I get this one or this one. This one's, a bigger motor." I said, "You get as much horsepower as you can afford, because I don't want to hear next year if I had 5 more horsepower." No, I don't want to hear it. So he did. He ordered the boat and sat back to wait, and he was to take delivery the night before he was to leave for Texas for a fishing trip. I thought that was extremely optimistic. I came home from work that night, and he was busily putting all of his tackle in his brand new boat. But the boat wasn't all the way in the garage, and I said, "You'd probably get better light if you back the boat all the way in." And he just kind of looked at me sheepishly, and he said, "It is." "What?" He said, "Well, you remember when I couldn't decide what motor?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I decided on the bigger motor." I said, "Uh-huh," not realizing that it was also much heavier. And because of that, a single axle trailer wouldn't carry it, and they had to put it on a double axle, which made it this much too long for the garage. I smiled. I went in the house, got my digital camera, came out, took a picture of the tongue of the trailer sticking out, and sent it to a friend of ours who was recovering from hip surgery with a note that said, order once, measure twice," which he enjoyed a great deal. So they went off on their trip. He came back, and my husband in his job is an inspector, so he always finds something that needs to be fixed. So the boat went back to the dealer a couple of times. But overall, he was pretty happy with it. But I came home one night, and the garage door was closed, and I said, "Where's the boat?" He smiled. I was nervous. He said, "It's in the garage." "But the door's closed." "Uh-huh," he said. There was a knot in my stomach. I said, "How?" He said, "Go look in the back." oh no. I walked down the sidewalk that goes the length of our garage, and I got to the edge of the garage and took a deep breath and looked around the corner. No, I didn't just see that. I looked again. Yeah, I did. Where there had been a window that morning when I left for work, there was now a doorway through which protruded a boat motor. The neighbors were driving down the alley, pointing. I just waved. Don came up behind me, put his hands on my shoulders, and said, "Look at it this way, honey. We've got the only garage in town that can get on plane." Now, getting on plane is what they call it when a boat takes off. The nose of or bow of the boat is up in the air, and when it levels off, that's on plane. I didn't like the joke. He said, "Don't worry. It's okay." He said, "I'm going to box it in. It'll be fine." That was 9 years ago. Neighbors still bring their friends in from out of town to show them the only garage in town that can get on plane. The motor still sticks out. But I realized I knew he was a bass fisherman when I married him. And I married him anyway. So I guess I'll keep him. And that's my triangle story.
That'd be an interesting story to tell in New York, since there's probably not too many bass boats or garages.
No. And I had a lot of people come up and give me ideas, like painting the side of the garage to look like the boat. So with the motor sticking out, it would just blend right in.
You talked about the Storytelling Guild, and they teach you kind of storytelling techniques. What are some things that people have to do in order to make a story interesting or to bring life to a story?
Certainly knowing your story well, and you have to like the story. I've tried telling a story I didn't like. I managed to get through it, but it was just so uncomfortable. And that story was Hans Christian Andersen's story, The Ugly Duckling. It's a horrible story. The things that when I went back and didn't do the Disney version, went back to the original version, the horrible things happened to that poor little duck. So, and knowing all this stuff, I just struggled through it and just that I told it one time and never will again. So picking stories you love, and the longer I'm doing this, the more I realize the stories are picking me. It talks to something in you that wants to be told, and a stage presence, how to use a microphone, all of those things. We do spend time working on that. We meet at the Spurlock every so often, and we can be in a situation where there is an actual theater. You don't have it full, but it's just, I had a horrible problem with stage fright when I first started. I couldn't make it through one story with my knees knocking, and having a safe place to tell helps you get past that.
And people there who are going to encourage you, give you honest feedback.
Right, and not until you're ready. If you're not ready for your story to be critiqued, they won't do it. Just keep practicing, and but getting that comfort with an audience is just huge.
Finding that confidence,
Yeah.
to go out and be willing to get in front of people you don't know and tell the story.
And part of it, I think, once you realize that the people that attend storytelling events really want to hear a story. I had grew up with a Catholic education. I had the little nun inside my head saying, "What makes you think people want to listen to you?" And once I got past that started thinking of what I was doing as sharing what I love with friends rather than standing up there saying, "Look at me." I could do that. And that was that tip was given to me by another performer. He said, "Try that." Oh, yeah. But now it's my job to pass that kind of information on to the people that are just starting.
So you talked about stories finding you. So what about a story inspires you to want to tell it? Do you know?
Sometimes I don't know, and sometimes it's years later I figure out why I told that particular story, why I needed that story. I had told a story for an event, and I just really liked the story. and I had been telling it several times. I told it over at the New Salem festival one year, and Elizabeth Ellis, who's a wonderful, amazing storyteller, when I came off the stage and we were talking, she said, that story is usually requested by women in shelters. Oh, really? That's interesting. It was probably not, maybe a year later, that I realized that I was one of those women, a first marriage, long ago. There were no shelters back then. But there were still lessons I needed to kind of work through. But I think it's a tribute to the husband that I've been married to for 29 years that I forgot.
Yeah.
So, and stories do really help a lot of people work through whatever they're going through.
Yeah. Sometimes can you tell when you kind of reach somebody in the audience with a
Yeah.
story?
Yeah, and usually they'll come up to you afterwards. I really, really loved that story,
Mhm.
and that's nice.
Something touched him in
Mhm.
that story. Yeah.
Well, this is a song, a ballad. This is the first one I ever did, and it was a Woody Guthrie song. What I find fascinating about some of the Woody Guthrie stuff is what inspired him to write particular songs. And this song, which sold 8 million records for another group, was inspired from a little article in the paper about a gunfight between a lawyer from Philadelphia and a cowboy. And the lawyer was messing with the cowboy's wife. And from that little article, Woody wrote this song. And it's called The Philadelphia Lawyer, or Reno Blues. Another cowboy song. Way out in Reno, Nevada, where romance blooms and fades, was a great Philadelphia lawyer, fell in love with a Hollywood maid. Come love and we will wander out where the lights are bright. I'll win you a divorce from your husband, and we can be married tonight. Now Bill was a gun-toting cowboy. 10 notches were carved in his gun, and all of the boys around Reno left Wild Bill's lady alone. One night as he was returning from riding the range in the cold, he dreamed of his Hollywood sweetheart. Her love was as lasting as gold. As Bill drew near to her window, a shadow he saw on the shade was the great Philadelphia lawyer, making love to Bill's Hollywood maid. The night was as still as the desert, the moon hung high overhead. Bill listened a while to the lawyer, he could hear every word that he said. Your hands are so pretty and lovely, your form so rare and divine. Come go with me to the city and leave this wild cowboy behind. Tonight back in old Pennsylvania, among the beautiful pines, there's one less Philadelphia lawyer in old Philadelphia tonight.
That's a story in itself. I mean,
Yeah, maybe that's why ballads have always attracted me, because they're just stories set to music. And Woody was great at writing.
Yeah, he was quite a wordsmith. So how'd you find out that the inspiration for that? Are there
There
things
was-
written about Woody where?
A film that Arlo had helped make, called Woody Guthrie Hard Traveling. The Rose Maddox and the Maddox brothers were the ones that had the big hit with it. But maybe it was, no, it was Lefty Lou, who he had played with. She was telling Arlo where that came from. And after somebody had heard him sing it, they sent him a picture of the cowboy. But yeah, it was a true story, but it was just a little. And to build that whole story, whole song out of it was, that just amazes me.
Yeah. So have you ventured into any songwriting yourself?
Oh, no. Years and years ago, just to help my kids, because they didn't like the way Puff the Magic Dragon ended, I wrote another verse to it, and I lost it, and I cannot remember it to save my soul. But it rhymed and everything. But no, I'm not a songwriter. I can play the guitar. I have many instruments at home that keep, my husband keeps wondering why all the stringed instruments make their way in.
Yeah, well, same reason as the boat, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I said, there's not one of my guitars or my dulcimers or my psaltery or the banjo that ever cost anything near what that boat cost. And he just kind of, yeah, okay. I give up.
So, does a story change over time as you tell a story? Does it? Do you sometimes change it, or does it?
It evolves. Sometimes a line or a phrase will just insert itself while I'm practicing or while I'm telling it, and it just works. And every story is different. It changes with the teller. And that's kind of the way it's supposed to happen.
Right.
There's a saying that Dan Ketting had on one of his CDs. A story is like a letter from the past that comes to us. We add our bit and send it on to the future, and it just kind of grows with each teller. Or, the stories are written to educate or to entertain. They're certainly the first form of education when language first started, when the hunters came in and described how they had captured their kill. That was entertaining information. When they, told you what not to do because this one died doing it, that was the first education.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that, you will die. So they're there to teach. They're certainly the oldest form of education, entertainment, or anything.
Certainly many cultures have stories. I mean, you just hear, creation stories. Every culture kind of has their own creation stories, how the world came about, how the animals ended up here, those kinds of things.
And there are similarities in stories all over the world. You'll find there's a Cinderella story in every culture. There are just themes in stories that are all encompassing. They don't really aren't any particular culture, but how that culture addresses that theme is different.
Right. Yeah. We're all, as much as we're different, there's a lot that we're alike.
And it's great to be able to share that. I don't tell much in the way of Native American tales because they're still, there are Native American tellers still actively involved in those stories. I do tell some, but I have a very small percentage of Osage, and I'm looking into some of those things. But I really want to know more about them than to tell their stories, I think. But they just get. I have storytellers collect books. We're always looking for new and different books of folk tales or different versions of stories. I'll usually, when I see a story, I'll look for 3 or 4 versions of it so I get down to what's the real story and then make that my own rather than take someone else's version.
So do you get most of your stories out of books, or do you get them from other storytellers? Is there...
Yes. You'll hear if I hear a storyteller tell a story that I like, I'll go research that story and maybe find a different version that I like, or because you don't want to take somebody else's stuff. But some of it, some people are writing lots of wonderful fictional stories, and they share them with other tellers and allow them to be told, which is very great. But I'm just not a fiction. I did write one, but it's not ready to be told yet. I don't like it yet,
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
very much.
So to practice, you sit around at home and tell stories to your husband? Or
No, back to the car again. People think I talk to myself everywhere I go, but no, I'm practicing stories, and if I don't like the way a phrase is, I'll stop myself and redo it. I'll read or tell a story into a microphone and record it, and then take that version and listen to it in the car to learn the story, but I also am hearing it in my own voice, and I can hear what I don't like about it. What I don't like, I put too much emphasis on this or not enough on that. And that's been a wonderful tool to learn stories and to learn how I want them to sound.
Right.
Can be a bit shocking at first.
Yeah, getting used to listening to your own voice. Yeah.
That's hard.
Why don't you have another story or a song? Or
I just learned this song. I hope I can get it right. This is actually a child from the Child Ballads, and I'm sorry I don't remember the gentleman's first name. His last name was Child. He went around collecting songs from the Appalachian area and these songs were just almost totally unchanged from England and Scotland. This is called Springfield Mountain, and it was a teaching song to tell you warnings. But they have to couch it in something a little bit, add a little, I guess, humor, and instead of a heavy song, it's very light, but it's about somebody dying, but that's folk music. On Springfield Mountain there did dwell a lovely youth. I knew him well. I yelled to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. I hate this lovely youth. One day did go down to the meadow for to mow. I owed to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. I he had not mowed quite round the field when a poison serpent bit his heel. I yield to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. They took him home to Molly dear, which made him feel so very queer. I hear to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. Now Molly had two ruby lips, which the poison she did sip. I yip to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. But Molly had a rotten tooth, and so the poison killed them both. I yip to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. On Springfield Mountain there did dwell a lovely youth. I knew him well. I yelled to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay, to Rudy knew, to Rudy nay. So I guess the lesson in that is don't mow in your bare feet, and good oral hygiene.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, most stories seem to have a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
There's always
There's a point.
something to learn out of them.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it doesn't hit you until third or fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time you've heard that story or told that story. You'll go, oh, that's what that means. Maybe I should pay attention.
So it's not always apparent.
No. And I think I like the subtlety of some of the stories. Of course, I like the ones that are just kind of out there, too. I like stories that have a bit of a twist. There's another one from England. when I first read it, I thought, oh, I have these 3 friends that are labor and delivery nurses. So I said, I'm going to tell them this story. And it's called The Two Pickpockets, and it is also from England. There was a pickpocket, and he was very good. He would have been very rich, but he lived out in the country, and there weren't just that many pockets to pick. So he thought to himself, if I move to the city, if I move into London, I'll be very, very successful. And so he did. And he was, in months, he was richer than he ever thought he could be. And one day he was plying his trade when he felt his pocket had been picked. He looked and he saw a beautiful blonde woman rushing away from him. And he thought, oh, she's the one that picked my pocket. And he followed her and he got his wallet back. But he knew she must be very talented as well, because nobody else could have gotten that close to him. So he proposed to her that they work together. And with the 2 of them working together, they would be far more wealthy. And they were. Before long, they had more money than either of them could have ever considered. And he got to thinking, we're both very good at what we do, but if we 2 married and had a child who had the talent of both parents, how much more successful could he be? And so again he proposed, and again she accepted. And by they had a beautiful baby boy with his mother's blonde hair and blue eyes, just incredibly gorgeous, but all was not well with that baby. His arm was twisted, and it looked almost as if it was coming out of his chest. Well, they were alarmed. A pickpocket with a paralyzed right arm wasn't going to be much of a pickpocket. So they took him to a doctor, and doctor said, well, he's far too young to do anything. You'll have to wait. But they didn't want to wait, and so they took him to another doctor, and finally, because they were so wealthy, they took him to the very best pediatrician in all of England. And the doctor pulled out his gold watch, and he checked the pulse in the good wrist. And then he checked the pulse in the paralyzed arm, and scratched his whiskers and said, well, that's odd. There's equal blood flow to both limbs. Oh, look at that baby. It's such a shame. Look how alert he is that something like this should happen to him. Why, look at how his eyes follow my watch. And he pulled his watch out of his pocket and he swung it back and forth, and that baby looked. And he followed that watch back and forth, and his arm began to tremble. And he followed that watch, and right before their eyes, his arm began to straighten out, and he was looking at that watch, and the arm became straighter and straighter, and his fingers began to uncurl to reach out for that watch, and that's when it fell out. The midwife's golden wedding ring.
So on to it.
See, those kind of stories just really, those little bitty
You
ones.
don't expect that.
Yeah,
I thought he was going to grab the watch maybe or something.
yeah, but he really was the best pickpocket in the world.
I think we have about 10 minutes left. I just want to let you know so you can time things a little bit.
Let's see. See if I can. Oh, I don't know. I know that'll take too long. I have to think stories through in my
we
head.
could just give a little, you have some contact information if people wanted to get a hold of you.
They can get hold of me through my email address, which is ladust@consolidated.net. I do have a MySpace page and a MySpace music page. Under MySpace music, it's Linda Dust singer-storyteller, I believe. And you can get all sorts of contact information there and upcoming events, which either the guild or I as an individual are participating in.
And we did talk about an upcoming event, October 24th and 25th, I believe.
Yes, it's down in it's still central Illinois, but it's kind of down in the hills and hollers on South Route 51, south of Pana. It's called the In Plain Air Music and Arts Festival, and it was started by friends of mine on their farm. And it's the focal point of the whole place is this rustic hand-hewn log cabin that we use as a stage. You can come and do camping, but I mean, there's no electricity. It's really primitive.
Primitive. They have
But
porta potties or anything?
oh yeah, yep. And yeah, but we really have had a lot of fun this year. I have a heater for my tent, though I learned my lesson last year, and but we play and there's demonstrations of I know we're going to have a blacksmith and possibly some spinners and a lot of there are trails to hike. They'll be doing the black powder rifles shooting and hatchet throwing and all sorts of different. We have a woodworker that uses only 17th or 18th century tools. That he does some amazing stuff with that.
Yeah.
And
Sounds nice.
I asked him about sanding something one time. I guess I insulted him. He says, if you cut it right, you don't ever have to sand it. But so that's really become a really fun thing to do. Let's trying to think of another song. That's too depressing. Let's do a story. This story is called Just Enough. There was once a king who had a tailor who fitted the king out with the most wonderful clothes. Everybody was very proud of how their king was always so perfectly dressed and well turned out. But they couldn't say the same about the tailor. He didn't take too much care of his personal appearance. He was always so worried about how the king looked, he really didn't care about himself. Well, people began to talk. Is this the way our royal tailor should present himself? This is kind of insulting. And word got back to the king, and the king thought, well, maybe it's because all the cloth he gets, he makes clothes for me. If I present him with a bolt of cloth as a gift, maybe that will give him the idea to dress nicer. So the king called for the tailor and presented him with the most beautiful bolt of golden yellow, soft as velvet corduroy the tailor had ever seen. And he said, this is a gift to you, make something for yourself. The tailor took it home and he rolled it out on his cutting table and he looked at it this way and he looked at it that way and said, I have just enough. And he clipped and he snipped and he cut and he stitched and he sewed and he folded, and the next day he had the most beautiful golden yellow, soft as velvet coat that anyone had ever seen. And he wore that coat and people were amazed. They said, why, that is the most beautiful coat I've ever seen. I've never seen a coat so beautiful. I wish I had a coat like that. And the tailor wore that coat. He was very proud. And he wore it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, until it didn't look so pretty. And he took it home and he knew he should probably throw it away, but he laid it out on his cutting table and he looked at it this way and he looked at it that way and he said, I have just enough. So he clipped and he snipped and he sewed and he stitched and he folded, and the next day he had the most beautiful, soft as velvet, golden yellow vest that anybody had ever seen. And he wore it, and people went, why, I've never seen a vest quite so beautiful. That is the most beautiful vest I've ever seen. Wish I had a vest like that. Taylor was very proud, and he wore it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, until there was nothing to be very proud of. And he knew he should throw it away. But he took it home and he laid it out on his table. And he looked at it this way and he looked at it that way and went, I am just enough. And he clipped and he snipped and he stitched and he sewed and he folded, and the next day he had the most beautiful golden yellow, soft as velvet bow tie that anyone had ever seen. And he wore that, and he was very proud. And they said, look at that bow tie. Why, I've never seen a bow tie quite that pretty. I wish I had a bow tie like that. And he wore it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out. And it was a mess. And he knew he should throw it away, but he took it home and he laid it out and he looked at it this way and he looked at it that way, and I think I have just enough. And he clipped and he snipped and he stitched and he sewed and he folded, and the next day he had the most beautiful golden yellow, soft as velvet button that anyone had seen. I said, well, look at that button. Oh, I've never seen a button quite so
beautiful. I wish I had a button like that. And he wore it day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, until there was just not much left. And he brought it home and he laid it out on his cutting table and he looked at it this way and he looked at it that way, looked at it this way again and that way, and he said, I have just enough. Well, there was really only one thing he could make out of it, and that was a story. And he shared it with all of his friends, and I've just shared it with you.
Very good.
Now you have a choice. If you want to have that story for your own, you can tell it 3 times in the next 2 days. And you will always have a story to tell. But if you don't, I'll keep it for you. You can come get it from any time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Linda, for being on the show. I appreciate you coming in all the way from Assumption. Illinois. There used to be a big drag racing capital. I remember when I was a kid, there was always be there Sunday. Assumption.
Yeah, there was rumors going around that they were going to reopen the racing strip, but I think it was just rumors.
Yeah.
Wishful thinking.
Different world these days. So.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed talking to you and having you here. Thank you.
Thank you.